So, as a leader in the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, how do you incorporate Christian principles into your leadership approach, especially in like organizational settings?
Yeah, great question. It's always a debated conversation in the ministry world, particularly in churches, that you have people say, well, this is the church or it's ministry, it's not a business. And what I have found is that there is an administrative business side of it that if you can implement some of those practices from the business world, you can be a whole lot more organized and execute the mission that the Lord has given us that much better. So I think it's important to when you say Christian principles, is to make sure we understand that Christian is to mean Christ follower. It's somebody set apart. It's somebody trying to grow into the created image of Christ. So as Jesus teaches on these sort of things of what it's like to follow him, he says like a tree is known by its fruit, or another way to say is, you're going to be known by what you produce. He'll also say that by this, they'll know that you are my disciples or my students, right? You're following me, and that's if you love people. So I think a couple of things that stand out to me when you talk about Christian principles and leadership, it's that one, it's servant leadership, and this isn't as common across the leadership world as it probably should be, but it is a very common statement used, servant leadership. So Jesus did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And having grown up in my leadership skills in the Marine Corps for 21 years, and then now in ministry, I've seen two very diversely different styles. But there are certainly organizations like the military where it's next rank, next title, next position, and there's a lot of climbing the ladder. And it takes great humility on the aspect of a leader to, regardless of title, and maybe you've heard this before. There's some people that say, I try to raise my kids this way, where it's like, look, it doesn't matter if you're talking to the CEO of the building or the guy who cleans the building, you treat everyone with the same respect that they deserve. And so what happens in the servant leadership world is some leaders will lord is the title the Lord uses, they'll lord that title over people. It's like, you need to respect me, you need to bow down to me, you need to do what I tell you to do because of my title. And I learned as a Christian who was growing in my walk with the Lord when I was a Marine Corps Sergeant Major, that's a rank and it's a unit title. And my hope was is that as I moved around the unit as the senior enlisted Marine, when I would tell people to do something, my hope was that as they had gotten to know me, my job was to earn their trust and respect so that as I told them to do something, they did it because they wanted to, not because they had to. And I see this a lot in sports where some athletes are doing what the coach says out of fear of punishment and things like that. And so this is where that whole servant leadership role comes into play, because what the Apostle Paul says is that he became all things so that he could reach some. He became all things to all people so he could reach some of them. And I love that because what he also says in a different part of Romans is that according to the grace given to us, we all have different gifts. So he says, if leading, then lead with diligence. And what that means in translation is that leadership is about position. There are ranks, there are titles, there are those sort of things that define who we are. I'm a director, so those things exist, but leadership is also about intention. So I'll just kind of close with that. Like the Christian principle, it's about a love for people. In leadership, you have to genuinely love the people that you're put in a position to lead, whether you're a head coach or a CEO, ministry director. You have to look at your team and say, look, I love these people. I want them to have the very best opportunities under my leadership. And so I'm going to give of myself, servant leadership, to train them, to teach them, to provide for them, to pray for them, to be there for them when it's hard, to encourage them when it's when they're doing well, and all those things, right? Because at the core of my leadership, it has to be about love for people, because that's what Christ was about. That's what he commands us to do.
I really love how you brought up servant leadership. It's a very big thing I also pride on, and a big concept we bring over here at Campbell, we talk about all the time is servant leadership. And I really like how you aspect it into the members of your team and how that can reflect and stuff. So in that addition with that, like what roles do you feel that your faith can play in shaping the culture of your team and the communities you lead, as you do lead a very large organization with FCA? And how do you kind of foster a positive and welcoming atmosphere with multiple different, perspectives and backgrounds and cultural beliefs too?
Yeah, I love how you said that, multiple different cultural beliefs and stuff, because that is exactly what culture is, right? It's the combined sum of individual traits and values and perceptions and all these sort of things. And I'm actually going through a training right now with my team called Sport and Culture Training, and we're uncovering how many things exists in the diverse pool of people we minister to, but as well as the diverse pool of people I'm trying to recruit from to build my team. So kind of, for me as a hiring manager, I'm looking at that in two ways. But sometimes these individual things that people bring are great, and sometimes not so much. It could be sin, it could be just wounds. But when we bring people into our team, and that's not a sports term. I mean, when we bring people into our team, they're coming with all their baggage, right? So that's what makes bringing a group of people together so hard. We are all so selfish, every single one of us. We love us some me. And so what faith does is the foundation for that I have found. And this is one of the things I absolutely love about FCA is it's not perfect as an organization. We don't have it easy. There's challenges and all that stuff exists. And that's probably the lie that's out there in the professional world is that when it gets hard, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm gonna go find another job. There's no perfect job. Every job I've ever had has its challenges, mostly centered around people. Yeah, people are just, we're sinners. We're all fallen. We all have our issues, and in moments of weakness, we let out an emotional thing that makes it stressful on somebody else. So, again, what faith does then for me in leading with that and having that sort of foundation that I'm trying to look for people who have those same values when I'm bringing people onto my team is that we all are going to meet at the foot of the cross. We're gonna come with humility. We're gonna lay aside our individual selfish desires and wants and things like that, and really uniformly together, we're all gonna focus on Christ. And what does He say? What does He teach? What is He calling us to do? Because in one of those things, that one thing might come easy to me. It might be challenging for you, but together we're all looking at that same standard. And so to that point, I think when you stand for something greater than us or greater than the organization, then it's the thing that we can all put first to help shape how we come together despite the differences. Now, the challenge for me then as a leader is that once we agree this is who we are as a team, then how can I still make sure I'm intentional to love and appreciate, respect, meet that person who they are in their individual me stuff. So we do things this way, but I recognize that here's a great example, and this is kind of servant leadership stuff. If I'm sitting at the head of the table, if you will, in a conference room, and I'm leading a meeting, and I say, "What do y'all think?" Whatever the question might be, I know on my team because I've taken the time to pay attention, take notes, get to know the individuals in the room. I know who's going to speak up first. I know who's long-winded, but I also know who I'm going to have to call on by name and say, "Hey, what do you think?" Instead of saying, "What do y'all think?" Because I know that one person is a little more introverted. But what's just fascinating is sometimes the person that talks a lot doesn't even always have the best input. It's the person who's quiet that just needs to be called on to give it. They've just got profound wisdom just buried down deep inside, and they just need to be called on. So that's a great example, I think, of just something so small, so simple. When you have an organizational we, this is what we do here in FCA, where we exist to be a means to bring everything together in Christ through the influence of coaches and athletes. We have standards for how we do that, but the individual me stuff is the things I've got to take time and be patient to understand about my team so I can try to get the best out of them. I can find, I know who's strong in what thing and who's weak in another thing. And it just, that way I'm not trying to lead the whole team with the same one size fits all set of stuff. So I think that what that does to your question is one, there's a level of trust within the team. We can be open with each other about where we're weak. I have to set that example. I have to be humble. I have to be open and transparent with my team sometimes to not, and I made this mistake for years, in an effort to want to set the example, I think I could come across as having it all together. I don't have any problems. And that can close people off to feel like that they can't open up to me if they can't relate to me. So I have found that as I start to open up a little more about where I'm scared, where I'm weak, where I'm struggling, where I'm frustrated, any of those things, that it's like the floodgates open up for everybody else. And it's a welcoming atmosphere. They feel like even though I'm not 100% like Ken or I'm not like her, I feel welcomed here, feel like I can be authentic and use who I am to help this team accomplish our goal.
I really liked what you were mentioning, especially with kind of addressing how everyone kind of brings their own thing to the table. And although sometimes it's great and sometimes it struggles, I definitely relate to that too, because I have like a leadership role I play on campus as well. And I do understand the challenges of that. Kind of going into it a little bit more with the idea that you're bringing up of challenges, how did you kind of learn how to navigate, the idea of adversity, both in ministry, but also in your other work experiences, professional work and being in the Marine Corps, and just understanding like how do you kind of gain the knowledge of being able to learn how to work around other people or kind of understand each person and learn how to incorporate them into your team.
Yeah, that's good. The overcome adversity part really stuck out to me because I think it's a great risk to our development as individuals if we run from adversity. If we look at it as something we want relief from, more than we look at it as something we want the Lord to um, do for us, to build us up, if we're just constantly seeking relief, then we'll always be running from something. The Marine Corps, obviously, as you might expect, doesn't run from a fight. They train you right out the gates for that sort of thing. But I was not groomed that way as a young man. I was skinny, bullied, excluded kind of kid. And for whatever reason, I just had this deeply rooted desire to serve my country. And I thought forever it was going to be the Air Force. It became the Marine Corps. And boot camp as an 18-year-old kid, actually, yeah, I was still 18. Um, I was in water survival training, and there was a moment in the pool where I was done. I was getting beat up, in the fighting skills. I wasn't handling the stress, the adversity of boot camp very well. I mean, 24/7, they're coming at you. And, I know now years later, having then eventually went back to be a drill instructor, I understand why the stress is put on you the way that it is, because if my nation sends me to combat, I've got to be able to do the simplest of things in a stressful environment. So, it's all by design to make sure that at the core of who we are, regardless of your job, everybody has this ability to do hard things. And so I'll come back to that on the ministry side here in a second. But so I was in the pool, I was drowning, I had just had enough, and inside I quit. So I was hanging at the edge of the pool, and I was done. And this water survival drill instructor came over and he squatted down over top of me and he said, "Hey, boy, do you have a dad?" And I was coughing through all the water I'd taken in, and I said, "Yes, sir." And he says, "Well, I bet he's proud of you now." And so I'm Ken Lovell the third, and for whatever reason, I know I'm not the only third or junior that's out there, but my name means everything to me. Like I have overwhelming respect for my father and grandfather, whose name I carry. And man, in that moment, that dude changed my life, and he had no idea who I was. He didn't know me from Adam, and I don't know who he is, but he reminded me who I am. And from that point forward, everything changed for boot camp. Everything changed for my career. I went from wanting to quit in that moment to now having been assigned and participated in and excelled in all of the Marine Corps' hardest and best units, 21 years worth. And so there's that moment of being reminded of who I was that changed everything for me. So throughout my career, now I don't shy away from adversity. Matter of fact, it's kind of quite funny because now if it's easy, then I usually get bored. I'm not really that interested anymore. So I learned that in the Marine Corps, and now certainly in ministry as well. That there's going to be these moments where you're going to want to quit. I've also learned in both sides, Marine Corps and ministry, that leadership is really lonely. The higher up the food chain you get, in those titles, eventually you get to a place where you don't have as many peers. And if you do, like people that are at the same level that you are by title, they're spread out. Like in FCA, the closest peers I have is Wilmington or Green or Goldsboro. It's an hour and a half away from me. We're not in the same town. We're not in the same building where I could just get up out of my office and go walk down the hallway and spend some time with somebody who gets it, who's going through what I'm going through. It's a little bit more challenging, and you have to be more intentional to pick up the phone and spend time with people who are going through the exact same thing you're going through. But throughout Scripture, God has shown us frequently that what he does is choose one to inspire many. If you just look at David and Goliath, right? 40 days, all these people standing in front of the adversity and shaking in their armor, not making a move, being apathetic, not doing anything to change the situation until a 14-year-old boy showed up in front of them who had more faith than they did. And so what I have learned and what encourages me when it comes to adversity, whether in ministry or just anywhere, just adversity in the professional sense, is that leadership is not about popularity, but purpose. It has got to be about who you are, that deep why. It's got to be about something greater than how you feel, because you will not always feel like it. It will get lonely, it'll get frustrating, it'll get challenging. Sometimes you'll feel like you're the only one, and that's probably true. We live in a world where just the masses, the many, will go with the flow. They'll walk the wide road, but Christ says, narrow is the road that leads to life, and few people find it. So what's just kind of interesting to look back over my career and the things the Lord has taught me is in the Marine Corps, it's an organization that's known as the few, the proud. In ministry, I discovered that I discovered that every month, 20,000 people or so Google search for a ministry job. Only 1% say yes. That's the same percentage of people who actually serve their country, which of that 1% that serve their country, 1% of that are Marines. So it's this what the Lord has just kind of revealed to me now, some 35 years later or whatever, is that it being a 1%er is all I've ever known. So it just helps give me some encouragement and that reminder that I am set apart. I am walking a narrow road. What I'm doing, not everybody is doing, but so I got to be real careful about that I'm not just trying to gravitate to the things that are popular or easy, and I don't let adversity push me away from what I was called to do.
That was really well said. I really like the idea where you brought up how leadership is a purpose and it's not just like a thing. I think that with that being said, though, like you are called, you had this purpose to serve as FCA, this role as a director in FCA and to join in the Marine Corps and serve for 21 years. How did like you can apply that to like how you support underserved or at-risk communities or smaller towns? As you do play a big role. And I'll say, like, for example, Richlands, I noticed you play a very major role, and that's a small town and it is growing too. And how do you deal with that stuff? And how can you use your Christian faith to help you with those ways that you lead and support those communities?
Yeah, it's good. The why that I was given right out the gates was clearly to be a means in my community to bring everything together in Christ through the influence of coaches and athletes. So while I am an athletic ministry, that distinctive, and when we have 8 or 9 actual distinctives in our ministry that define who we are, but it also gives us the strength to say who we're not. So we don't get distracted. We don't try to drift into another lane and try to be something we're not. But that why for me really gave me purpose beyond just simply being like a sports chaplain. It can get really easy to just kind of show up and minister to teams, and there you go, that's it. But again, that's not always fun. It's not always easy. There's pushback, there's opposition, there's adversity, there's a lot of things that go on that make you question whether or not you want to keep doing that or not, even though it's leading people to the Lord. And even though eternity is at stakes, there's just for me, it took having a why, a purpose that was bigger than a lot of that stuff so I could really try to remember constantly this is what I'm a part of in this community. And so when it comes to what makes FCA distinct, I believe, and this isn't even one of the distinctives FCA gives us, it's just something I've defined for who I think we are and how and what sets us apart is that we go to them where they are. So that underserved, at-risk communities, any of those kind of things, to be like Christ is to go to them where they are. I mean, when we refer to Christ as Emmanuel or God with us, when John says that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, it means he pitched his tent where we are. He didn't sit back and expect them to get right and then come to us. And this is what churches battle all the time. They are a physical location that they're hoping they can outreach in some way to draw people in. And for us, we are exist. We don't have a building, we don't have an office like that. We go get them where they are and create those environments where they are in hopes then that their faith as it matures is going to draw them to want to be in community with like people and walk away from the things that are, you know, uh, detracting from who they were created to be. So, the other thing about that is meeting them where they are. It isn't just us going to them. Like I say, a lot of times FCA isn't just what happens when I show up, and that would be any staff person, but it's really, if we're doing it right, FCA is more about what happens when I leave. So I rarely go out to Richlands anymore, not for any reason other than just trying to build that other places, and that's a full-time job. But Coach Bird and Salzman and the student leadership team out there with Elizabeth and that crew, I mean, they are running it beautifully. and they don't need me. And so that's the thing is, we want to step into these communities, into these schools, into these teams, whatever the group is, whatever the atmosphere is, and equip them with something that they begin to then change the environment themselves, that they have ownership of it. And again, I think, it's just naturally within us. We're all looking for relief. We want people to do things for us. And this is the big debate, even in our country, at the leadership level that is probably at the top of the food chain, maybe in the world, when you talk about our president, depending on which party that president is a part of, you start to see two very different approaches for how to lead people. One party is all about let's give them a whole bunch of things, and then the other parties let's try to equip them with the ability to change things for themselves. And the thing about it is one's easy. Don't get me wrong, I didn't mind getting hundreds of dollars just given to me, to pad the bank account with or go get something I wanted. But it's harder to train yourself and to put in the time and the effort to make things right for yourself. And that's the challenge in leadership is that that's the right way to do it. But when you do it that way, it's not easy. And it presents a pretty significant challenge to keep people faithful, to keep showing up and doing it every day when it's not easy.
No, and I like agree. I really liked how you brought up too, like that you're kind of growing out and branching out in the sense that you have staff at Richlands as an example, and then you also work in a bunch of other places. And I think it's a really good response because not every leader understands that a lot of times you have to go to them. You have to go to those underserved at-risk communities and stuff. And so
Yeah.
with that being said, like I've kind of mentioned multiple times, I feel like you've made really remarkable strides in expanding FCA in Onslow County area, as that's where I'm from. So and a bunch of other areas I know too. Could you share like some key strategies and initiatives that kind of contribute to this growth? What valuable lessons have you learned throughout this process of growing FCA? And like what challenges have you encountered through trying to grow it? And like what way did you kind of create like organizational development and obviously as well the main goal to like spiritual growth among others within your organization as also with like in other communities.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all that. And I mean, look, I mean this when I say it, like to the glory belongs to the Lord. I'm a broken man, a sinful man. I'm an imperfect man, and for whatever reason, He chose me to do this. And it's me just trying to show up like the parable of the talents and just give back to Him twice as much as He gave me. And I don't know if I'm a 5 talent person or a 2 talent person or a 1 talent person, but I'm just trying to give back to Him as faithfully as I can in the midst of how broken I am um, it's the feeding of the 5,000, right? If I just give Him what I got, then He'll multiply and He can do way more than me. And so one of the things I've had to do right out the gates, this is the game changer that everybody I recruit to come on the team, I walk them through this drill, is to have a why. Now we have a why for sure that I try to draw and attract people to be a means to bring everything together in Christ. But that process, seeking the Lord uh, for calling, like if I'm going to do this, Lord, if I'm going to walk away from the Marine Corps, if I'm going to answer and surrender to a full-time calling to ministry, what could be? That was the question I was asked. What could be? So I worked through that, and long story short, I was given the word team as the word that would define my calling. Be a means to bring everything together in Christ, because that's what team is. It's a group of people coming together to accomplish a common goal. But then the depth of it came when He gave me so the question was what could be, but then the passion came that it should be. And so in Ephesians 1, this is the Lord leading me to His word. Paul says that the very mystery of God's will is that everything would come together in Christ. That's the very mystery of God's will for us. So here He is choosing me to be a means in this area to fulfill that will He has for us. And my goodness, what a what a task. But that why was so important because that is the thing that's driven me for 10 years now when I'm getting ready to release a book on my calling, and it'll get into all the details. But I've been given a lot of opportunities to just walk away and say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. So I'll get into that maybe in just a second. But so that was the first thing, is the why. The second thing I did was notice that who we were as an organization had drifted away from what really FCA was supposed to be about. We were supposed to be about coaches and athletes. We had drifted into just being sort of this banner that people who wanted to pray and read the Bible together they kind of used our name to have a Bible study on campus. As I went around and met like 10 campuses, the only 10 we had FCA on it when I got started, there was a group of kids, none of them athletes, led by a teacher. Most 99% were not even coaches. And so when I went to coaches to find out why them or their players are not involved, I discovered that there was just a conflict. When FCA was meeting on the schools was in conflict with when the teams had practice. So again, meet them where they are, go to them where they are, equip them where they are for what they need to grow in their relationship with Christ. So we went from 10 huddles when I got started, or 11. It was 9 campus, and then 9 of those campuses, 2 of them had coach huddles as well. We went from 11 total huddles to 185 in about a year and a half to 2 years. It just took off as coaches and athletes felt like somebody was meeting them where they were, giving them what they needed to grow in their walk with Christ. And then as they did, the game started to change that we watched. Teams were more resilient and they could face someone who opposes them better. They could handle all the adversity. They could handle success. They had a different work ethic. I mean, all these following Christ fruits started to come. So there was that. That's number two. And then there was my personal growth. I had to dedicate an enormous amount of time every single week, multiple times a week, to kind of inserting myself in things, conferences, books, studies, podcasts, just things that would really expose me to a whole lot of different ways of leading an organization. Because as a Marine leader, even though I probably have a master's degree in leadership after 21 years of going through all the kinds of leadership training and courses, with the Marine Corps, you just kind of show up when you're supposed to, how you're supposed to, read the order, follow the play. You just run the play. There's not a whole lot of like creativity and development as much in my role as a senior enlisted leader. Those things were a little bit more on the commanders, but and even still not as much as how I have it now. So I had to put a lot of time in to figure out what about the Marine Corps is going to be great to come in and thread in over here, and expose the ministry to that would help elevate where we are. But then what things do I need to let go? And it took me studying how leaders outside of the Marine Corps do things. One of the things I was given too that really helped shape me as an administrator in this ministry, being a director, is the question, is the way you're doing the work of the ministry hurting the work of the Lord in you? So Pastor Craig Rochelle, again, he said, is the way you're doing the work of the ministry hurting the work of the Lord in you? And so I had to make sure I learned how to include the Lord in his ministry, the thing he called me to. I had to make sure I was still in relationship with him and putting him first and seeking him and praying. And I had not been great at that over the years. Sometimes I just rest on my own laurels and skills and abilities and get into this rhythm and I just go, go, go. And it takes being intentional to stop and slow down and seek the Lord and make sure I'm not missing something that he's trying to show me or teach me. So those are those are the big four. The why, getting FCA back on track to who we are, and then really investing in myself as a leader so that I could be prepared for all the changes, all the growth, all the things my team would need of me. I had to, like Paul, be all things to all people. Really had to grow myself as a leader so that I wouldn't be the lid to the organization. I didn't want the organization to be growing and then bump into me as if I was in the way. I had to keep growing as a leader so that I could receive this growth that we're inspiring. And then the challenges, the hardest things was the attacks. In ministry, there's a thing called spiritual warfare. It really exists. But what was so challenging for me is all the attacks I was getting from people that were trying to get rid of me, get me fired, accuse me of things. I mean, just a litany of things that made leadership extra lonely. It was coming from church people in the church, people who claim to be Christians. That was really alarming for me to walk through that season and experience church hurt, if you will, for the first time. I've had several fundraising worries. We exist as a ministry, 100%. All of our staff salaries, organizational costs, everything is 100% funded based on what I have to do as a director to draw in that support from our community. So there's no pot of money we inherit. We're not like a local business that sells a bunch of things that just, inherits profit. We are a nonprofit, 100% local missionary team, and that's extra challenging to do that. And then the last challenge for me, I think, is even though I know leadership is not about popularity but purpose, it has been a challenge to stand alone and feel like man, does nobody really want to be a part of this? And even though that's not true, there's tons of people that are a part. I think when I have to spend so much time trying to get FCA going in other areas and drawing new financial supporters and all these things, it takes an enormous amount of time to follow up, to follow up, to follow up, to follow up, to get people to finally come through and do these things that they say they want to do, or to just get an answer anymore. It isn't that they said no, and I'm trying to get them to say yes. They're just ignoring me. I'm getting ghosted over here. So, those sort of things are really, really challenging in this ministry to, again, remember that this is what the Lord called me to do. It's my job to inspire them and stay faithful to that purpose and not get distracted by being in something that feels like it's just not popular. I wrestle with that sometimes. Like, maybe they don't want me around here anymore. Maybe I am losing confidence and losing their trust. Who knows? And maybe I shouldn't do this anymore. And that's a real challenge to just kind of work on your own self-confidence, uh, to rely on the Lord.
I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you said. And honestly, you really taught me a lot, especially because I am in a leadership position here and I'm always looking for more advice and more ways to improve my leadership, as well as for future goals and careers and aspirations. And I just want to say I'm really grateful for the time that you've given me to learn more about how you lead and how you've really made an impact on beyond just FCA and what you do. I think I'm really grateful for you taking the time to do this.
Well, thank you, Emma. You are a great interviewer. I'm so excited for. I think you ought to like take a look at that minor major thing. You gotta don't lose sight of that leadership and all that outreach stuff. You got a real talent there, and I think so. Wherever you land, that's going to be a great asset.
Well, thank you so much. I'll make sure I get this stuff sent to you for the video so you can also have it and whatnot.
Be great.
I
Thank
appreciate
you,
your
Emma.
time. I hope you have a great day.